Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're continuing with our weekly series of shirim on the Torah of recovery with the light revealed, where we attempt to draw the light of the Torah onto the path of recovery and reveal the path of recovery within the light of the Torah itself. And in this week's parsha, we encounter this real confrontation of what it means to develop a Torah that allows us to bring our struggles into it, to develop a way of looking at the light of the Torah, not a Torah that provides simply ideals, but rather a Torah that illuminates the reality of this world itself. Very often, most of us, most individuals who have developed in a spiritual climate of the last 100 years, most of us operate with a binary opposition that there are experiences of light and spiritual connection where things are going very well. And there are moments of darkness and spiritual disconnection when things are not going well. There are moments of smooth experience where life is expressing to me the path that I hope it will express. And then there are moments in life where it feels that a person has deviated away from the path and they don't know where they find themselves in the world. There are moments of light and there are moments of darkness. There are moments of success and there are moments of failure. And there are endless binary oppositions that can be applied, synonyms upon synonyms that define different modalities, but each of them ultimately split into a singular split. This is good and this is bad. This is light and this is dark. This is ease and this is difficulty. And in developing this split perspective, so what we assume is that good is good and bad is bad. When things are going well, that's when things are good. That's when I'm experiencing life in its fullness. That's when I have a reason to push forward. But then, God forbid, when things are not going well, so a person seems to slide backwards into a place of meaninglessness because they feel this is the opposite of finding God in my life. Now I find myself in darkness. And so a person chooses to only find God in good things, to only find God in moments of revelation, to only find ease and comfort when things are going the way that I would like. But when things are not going the way that I would like, when there's a struggle, I fall back into the old systems of thinking that I look at myself in a victim way of looking. I judge myself and I find myself stuck in the swampland of shame. And one of the most significant interventions, one of the most significant shifts in how we appreciate existence itself that the light of Torah provides for us is that while there is always going to be a split screen of experience, there will always be light or dark, good or bad, right or wrong. There will always be a path forward and a path backward. There will always be moments of connection and moments of disconnection. But instead of assuming that only the positive moments of light are experiences of God and that the negative moments of darkness are experiences that are devoid of God, Judaism, in the light of the Torah, the light of Pnimius Torah, says no, everything is part and parcel of a unified whole. A person's life is not only the good moments, and a person's life is not only the bad moments. In fact, a person's life is a unity that contains both elements within itself. And that God and our higher power is not simply revealed on the easy path of light and illumination and goodness, but rather our higher power reveals himself as fundamentally in the path of darkness and in struggle. Obviously, we want to find the light. Obviously, we want to connect when there's ease. Obviously, we want to feel that things are going well. That's the natural tendency of the individual's propulsion further. But what happens when we find ourselves knocked off our game? What happens when we deviate? What happens when we wake up in the morning and we don't feel like we've got it? So, according to the old model, which says that God and the higher power and light is only found when things are easy, so then what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to surgically remove all of the negative moments in my life because I see them as being completely separate from my spiritual quest. But armed with the illuminative light of Pnimius HaTorah and the light of Yiddishkeit, what we come to understand is that yes, there's darkness, yes, there's concealment, yes, there's difficulty, but nobody ever said that that's separate from godliness. Nobody ever said that these moments where I feel things being absent are actually absent. In fact, there's nothing that's absent, and the light of our higher power reveals itself in every moment of our lives, in the good and the bad. When we're able to break free from the infantile perspective that God is only good moments of my life, but not in the difficult moments of my life, we can come to understand a far more holistic understanding, a far greater perspective of godliness, which gives me the strength that I need to deal with the good moments as well as the bad moments. Rather than looking at the good moments as God being present and the bad moments as God being absent, we have to reevaluate our conception of godliness to realize that all things are an expression of our higher power. All things are an expression of godliness. And therefore, I can experience godliness by way of positive and easy moments in my life. And I can also experience godliness by way of difficult moments and the moments of concealment in my life. The tools in which I will have to utilize my spirituality when things are going well operate in one way, and the tools that I will have to utilize to experience spirituality and mindfulness in moments of struggle will be another way. But simply because they're two separate skill sets doesn't mean that they come from a different source. The full expression of human experience in this world is the playing field and the playground through which we reveal the light of our higher power. And to excise an entire half of our experience, which is the moment of concealment, and relegate it to moments of distance from God or absence of God or non-connection to God, we have the ability to rehabilitate our entire perception of self and realize that God is with me in the good and God is with me in the not good. God is with me when it's easy and God is with me when it's difficult. I just have to be mature enough to come away from that infantile perspective of God being one way all the time and life being one way all the time, and open my mind up to the very simple fact that yes, life is complicated and I contain multitudes within myself. Or as Rav Kook responded to somebody who said about him that he had a torn soul because he wanted different things. Rav Kook responded, of course I have a torn soul. Everything is torn. The human being is torn. It's split into two. It doesn't mean that those two sides are not fundamentally unified. It just means that that fundamental unity is going to be revealed in two different ways. Very often, these are traps that we fall into in the developmental stages of our infantile subjectivity. As Winnicott explains, and as Klein explains, that ultimately when a child is born, there's a certain sense of omnipotence. There's a certain illusion of omnipotence. The child feels that it is the center of reality. It's not aware of the cause and effect relationship with its actions and the outcome, and therefore it thinks it's hungry and it gets fed. It thinks it needs to be changed and it gets changed. The child is illusioned into the sense that it is all powerful and what it thinks is what it gets. And in the healthy process of development, the child is slowly but surely enabled to enter into a plane of disillusionment, a time where the child comes to be aware of the fact that I am not omnipotent and I am not the dictator of all that takes place in this world. And sometimes the parent is there and sometimes the parent is not there. And I'm allowed to be left wanting sometimes. And my parent is not coming to immediately soothe whatever issue is there, but I'm left to balance with it. I'm left to hold it a little bit because there's other things in the world. And in that process of disillusionment, what the child comes to understand is that the parent can be good enough. It can be good and bad. There are times of distance and there are times of absence and closeness, but ultimately it's the same parent. And the sum total of that division and that separating of the types of experience gives birth to a unified model of a good enough parent. But if a child is never enabled to go through that disillusionment and they continue to believe that things are all or nothing or black and white, what they'll begin to do is they'll begin to split. They'll begin to say, oh, when there's goodness, it's one way, and when there's badness, it's another way. They don't represent the same thing. They represent two separate things. And if a person goes down that path, God forbid, of duality and dualism and splitness, what they'll come to find is that they're going to experience severance and darkness and difficulty as something that is actually devoid of spirituality, rather than being the place where I can cultivate a new type of spiritual relationship, which is connecting to God through concealment itself. If I split God into something good and bad, then the good is going to be the good and the bad is going to be something terrifying that I can never look at, and I'm terrified of it because it represents the opposite of God. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of. Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of confronting Pharaoh. Pharaoh was the heart of darkness. Pharaoh represents that kernel of negativity in the world, that enslaving power that holds somebody so addicted under its sway that it appears to be completely devoid of light and it seems to be stuck in utter and absolute darkness. And in this week's Parsha, God says to Moshe, he says, Moshe, bo el Paro, come forth to Paro. Come forth to the palace of Paro. Come talk to Paro. And again, the palace of Paro represents this fiendish place of destruction, darkness, concealment, hiddenness, one that is not illuminated with the presence of God. And the Zohar HaKadosh asks a question. Why does the pasuk say, Bo el Paro? Why does it say, come to Paro? It should say, go to Paro. A person should go to Paro. A person shouldn't say, come forth to where I am. That implies that Hashem would have been found with Paro himself. Theoretically, if Hashem was outside of the palace of Paro, Theoretically, if Hashem was outside of the palace of Paro, so then Hashem would say, go towards Paro, not come forth to Paro. The Zohar says the implication is that God is beckoning Moshe to come forth from within the palace of Paro itself, from within the heart of darkness itself. And the Zohar Kadosh says that Moshe Rabbeinu was terrified. Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of confronting Paro. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu afraid of confronting Paro? Because up until this point, Moshe Rabbeinu was still operating with a mindset that there's good and there's bad. There's light and that there's darkness. There's presence and there's absence. There's the light of illumination and there's the darkness of concealment. And in Moshe's mind, they were still split to a certain degree. Moshe Rabbeinu had not experienced the full clarity of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of exiting the stuckness and receiving the light at Har Sinai. And so Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid. He was afraid of looking at the heart of darkness itself, because the heart of darkness seems to represent this congealment of difficulty that rests outside of the light of our higher power, as if there are experiences that are devoid of an ability to connect to our higher power. Until Hashem whispers to him, he says, Bo, come here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm in the palace of Paro. I'm in the darkness itself. And it's only with that recognition that Moshe Rabbeinu develops the confidence, the Kedusha, to enter in. What is Hashem saying when he says, come forth to Paro? He's saying the darkness is also an expression of me. There's nothing in this world that is devoid of me. And all concealment and all difficulty and all struggle and all falling and all suffocation that comes from the concealment and the difficulty, all of it are opportunities for a person to come in contact with a connection to God that could not have been revealed other than the difficulty itself. We don't celebrate the difficulty. We don't go out searching for the difficulty. But when we find ourselves in the difficulty, it is of utmost significance to realize that we do not need to draw the light of godliness from elsewhere into this experience. The light of godliness is here in this experience right now. I don't have to go out and buy something to make it right. I just have to dig and dig and dig to uncover that which is always already all right within each and every moment. When a person is capable of expanding their experiences to include all that which appears to be concealed and negative, we double the playing field in which we encounter our higher power. Because instead of only finding God in the light, we now also learn how to find God in the darkness. And finding God in the light and finding God in the darkness demand different spiritual tools. Finding God in the light is the experience of, wow, it's all absolutely clear and fundamentally true, and I have no questions and I have no doubts, and everything is moving along like easy street. But then a person finds themselves in moments of darkness, and in moments of darkness, a person cultivates faith, a person cultivates trust, a person cultivates longing and yearning for that which is not present. It's the place of memory rather than a place of non-forgetfulness, which is when a person is in the light. The human experience is a composite of two separate tracks of experience, the good and the bad, the light and the dark, which are fundamentally both unified in their core to reveal the light of life. The life of experience, the recovery process, addiction and recovery reveals this more deeper than ever. That life is a composite thing and it provides us with many, many different types of experiences. But with the radical faith that God is found everywhere and that I can find myself wherever I am, and that wherever I am, that's where I go. And wherever I go, that's where I am, rather, and that I can cultivate acceptance within this place, then there's no place devoid of him. And a person allows themselves to become a guest house where they can welcome God in no matter what moment. A good emotion is meeting God through illumination, but a bad emotion, it's not that I'm not meeting God. It's not that I'm not bringing my higher power into the situation. It's just a different type of experience. I have to make room for it. When I find myself towards anger, when I find myself in the tendency towards anger, it doesn't mean that God is absent from there, God forbid. It just means that God needs to be found within the anger so that the anger can be overcome and subdued. And when I'm capable of wrestling myself out of something difficult or dark, well, I've just uncovered the light of godliness and the light of goodness and the light of all rightness that rests within each and every experience. So when we begin to unify our experience, and instead of seeing the good and the bad, we can see unity that expresses both good and bad at once, we learn to welcome God in, to welcome our higher power in to every moment of our life, so that there's no moment devoid of him. And when I'm angry, I can learn how to find comfort with God in my anger. And when I'm joyous, I can learn how to find joy with God in my joy. But the human being must bring their entire selves. There's no part of the self that is ugly in the eyes of God. There's no part of the self that is not contained within the unity of the soul, which is a reflection of the light of God. And when we expand our horizons of spiritual understanding and we say, Bo El Paro, we say, wait a second, God is calling me forth from within darkness itself, we come to the realization realization that God is within the darkness itself. We don't have to bring God from elsewhere into the darkness. We just have to dig down deep to reveal that which has always already been there. And by reorienting ourselves, we open up the closedness of our experiences, and the locks become openings where we can bring God into every experience, every part of ourselves. And what we once felt was devoid of the light of spirituality is now revealed to be the deepest place where we can encounter the true wonder of God, the true wonder of spirituality, the true wonder of recovery, which is the ability to be okay wherever we find ourselves. That no matter what the circumstances, a person has the unique capacity of connecting the innermost point of their mind, which is the das, which is connectivity, which is the essential point of attention and intention and the soul itself. That is something that is free to attach itself to the light of godliness in any moment, irrespective of what the circumstances are. May they be circumstances where I'm not able to garner the strength? Absolutely. It doesn't mean that God is absent there. It just means that I'm unable of garnering the strength. But there is no place devoid of him. There is no moment in our lives devoid of him. There is no place so shameful that it is devoid of him. There is no fear so great that it is devoid of him. And Be'ezras Hashem will be able to open ourselves up to the long path and the large path of recovery, where the entirety of our lives becomes one long expression of godliness, one long expression of our connection to our higher power, to draw down more and more serenity, more and more calmness, more and more rightness, and to be zocha to coming to terms of that God is found everywhere, and then getting to the place where we don't even feel the darkness anymore. Be'ezras Hashem.